so we are back with another haircut. I got my model Nick, and today what we're going to do is kind of a chunky texturized cut here on top. We're going to do it nice and tight on the sides and back, keeping it nice and clean. I'm going to cut the top of the hair, just the tip of the scissor. So we're going to cut a nice chunky top up here. Nick will be able to comb it more groomed if he wants, or he'll also have the versatility and option to get some pomade into his hair, into his hands, and kind of wear it a little bit more textured. What we're going to do now is get shampooed, and then after that we will start the haircut. What I did first was I sectioned off the top. We're going to address the sides first, the sides and the back. We're going to take it nice and tight, and then we're going to save the top for last. So what I'm going to do first is take my first section right here above the ear, and I'm going to take this in as tight as my fingers can go. We're going to take this nice and short on the sides, but I want to kind of start to see what Nick's hair does as we start to cut it shorter. You know, lots of people's texture will change as you start to cut it shorter. So I want to kind of get an idea of what his texture is going to do as we start to take the hair down. My way forward, and again, just taking the hair as short as I can go with my fingers. We're probably going to do some scissor over comb to take it even tighter, but right now I'm just kind of getting an idea of what the hair is going to do as we take it down. And then right here in the front, basically just following his hairline, which curves right here, I'm going to comb the hair forward and just trim the hair following the hairline. Okay, so now I'm just going to continue doing this through the back. And basically we're just going to get rid of a lot of this length, so we can go in there and start scissor over combing the hair nice and tight. But before we do that, we just want to get rid of a lot of this bulk. I'm just following the head shape all the way around, cutting pretty much finger distant, meaning my fingers are as tight to his head as possible. So I'm cutting his hair as short as my fingers will allow me to comb, or excuse me, allow me to cut. And as I come here towards the center back, I start to over direct a little to the previous section above the occipital bone. Right here I'm now officially in the center back, over directing a little bit to the right. And below the occipital bone, I'm just going to take it in as tight as my fingers will allow me to take it. I want it as short as possible. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Part again, I'm just getting rid of a lot of the bulk so that we can start to scissor over comb. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a wider tooth comb, and we're actually going to start the scissor over comb process. We're going to start right here on the sides and work in panels. We're going to do panel number 1, which is above the ear. Panel number 2 is in front of the ear. And then I work panel 3, 4, and 5, basically working my way back. Scissor over comb is a technique that a lot of people struggle with because they find themselves kind of all over the place. You know, a good tip is to do your best to make the panel that you're working on look as good as possible before moving on to the next panel. And if you can execute the panel you're working on perfectly, then it's less overwhelming to scissor over comb the whole head because you're basically just doing a panel at a time. So, for instance, this panel above the ear, spend as much time as you need perfecting this panel right here before moving on. And once you've perfected this panel, then you can move on to the next panel and not have to worry about, did you do this panel perfectly and do you need to go back? You probably are always going to need to go back a little bit, but for the most part, if you can really execute each panel as you're doing it to as close as perfection as possible, then you don't really have a lot of scissor, kind of going all over the place, making sure it all looks good. Now I'm going to work this front section. And right here, I just want to make sure it blends into the sideburn. Okay, and again, just taking each panel at a time. So I'm working this side panel now, making sure that panel number 1 blends with panel number 2 before I carry on to the back. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, right above the ears, kind of a technique that I learned. It's basically the apple peel. Meaning you're going to take your thumb, pull down the ear, and then like you're peeling an apple, you're going to take your comb and comb down this loose hair so that you can cut the hair around the ear. Okay, so now we're going to continue basically going through and scissor over combing into the back. Again, I just want to be conscientious of each panel blending in with the previous panel. Okay, so right here behind the ear, it's kind of hard to scissor over comb this way because the ear blocks it. So you want to take your hand and turn it upside down so that you can scissor over comb with the tip of the scissor. So you can sneak it right in there behind the ear without having to worry about the ear getting in your way. And basically I'm just going to continue scissor over combing all the way around the head in panels till we get to the other side. Alright, so basically now that we have scissor over combed the sides and the back nice and tight, what I want to do is address the top. So we're going to go ahead and take these clips out. Like I said, we're going to leave the top a little bit longer, but we're going to definitely cut some of the length off. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a section at the very center, top, and that's what we're going to use to start a new guide and create our shape on how we want the top. So right now, I want the front to be the longest, but as you can see, the top center is the longest. So what I'm going to do is using the top or the front as my guide, I'm going to cut from there slightly diagonal. It's going to feel square, but it's going to be slightly diagonal. So letting the top front fall out, and I'm just using the points of my scissor to cut a choppy line. Again, we're going for texture, so opposed to just cutting straight across in a nice clean line, we're actually going to chip into this. And we're going to do that for every section at the top. So the top up here is going to be very broken into and very texturized, which will allow him to wear his hair if he wants to kind of choppy and texturized versus so clean cut up at the top. Okay, and I'm just taking this all the way back. And there is our line right there. There's our section. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a section all the way across from the back. Okay, and you'll notice that with the center being our guide, that piece is already going to be gone. So you can see it right here. There's the shorter piece that we cut. It's long on both sides. And I'm just going to use that as my guide and cut horizontally, side to side. Cutting a nice square top. And we can round these corners off later, but for now, we're just going to cut a nice square line up here at the top. Okay, so kind of just playing with it, kind of seeing how the texture is affecting the hair. I'm going to take another section, and I'm going to take sections working my way towards the front. Now the rule of thumb is when you're chipping, you're actually closing your blade as you're pulling back. So that technically kind of helps avoid cutting your finger. You'll probably cut your finger from time to time, but you don't want to close the blade as you're going in. You kind of want to close the blade as you're coming out, if that makes sense. Okay, so now what we need to do is blend the top into the side. And what I like to do is do it in phases, actually. I prefer, in some cases, to leave a disconnected side from the ear forward. Sometimes. Knowing that, that's just my personal preference, I will usually blend the sides starting from the ear back. Because I do know for sure I want to blend the sides from the ear back, but sometimes I do like to keep the ear forward disconnected. So, knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and take this first section, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of chip in using the tip of the scissor to cut kind of a jagged line, not super straight. Again, just kind of chipping in, and we may have to scissor over comb it a little bit. But in the meantime, I do like carrying the chipped in effect over here on the side as well. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is just go through and cut the corner. We have a corner because we cut the top square and the side square. And wherever there's a corner, there's weight. So I'm just going to round that corner off a little bit just so it's not as heavy. And the way we're going to do that is basically taking sections, and you can see the corner right there. So I'm just going to round that corner off. And just working my way around to the crown area. Okay, so now I'm just taking scissor over comb, but I'm using the tips just to, again, kind of break in and give it a little bit more texture. I can really see how heavy the hair is simply because Nick has a ton of it. So we're going to layer the front so it's not as heavy. The first thing we're going to do is cut a blunt line by pulling it down. And basically you're kind of cutting bangs that are going to be pushed away, so they're not really bangs. But by getting rid of some of the length, that's the first thing, we're going to make it lighter. And then, after we get rid of the length, by cutting a blunt line, we're going to layer it. Kind of like a layered bob, except we're doing a layered fringe, so that it's going to be easier for Nick to dress and style his hair without it falling down due to the weight of his hair being so thick. So, now that we've cut that length off, we're going to go ahead and just take these sections here and layer that corner off that we just created due to cutting it one length. You can see the corner right here. It goes like this and like that. So, I'm going to chip that corner off. Just to lighten it up. And again, this is something that you can really tell once the hair is dry. When the hair is wet, it's hard to see how heavy it really is. You know, hair when it's wet, no matter whether you have a lot of hair or not, a lot of hair is always heavy just because of the water. The moisture pulls the hair down. However, once the water is dried, that's when you get to see how heavy it really is. So now that we have all the water out of the hair, it allows us to get an idea of how heavy Nick's hair really is, just because he has so much of it. So starting here at the center back, let me turn Nick sideways a little bit so you can get a better picture. I take a piece of hair, I twist it, and then I take my scissors, and I don't close them all the way. I just barely close them. And what it does is it starts to cut a lot of the hair, but not all of the hair, because you're not closing it all the way. And I'm working from the bottom, working my way to the top. So you are able to texturize down here at the base of the hair, as well as the middle of the hair, as well as the top of the hair. Working my way to the top. When somebody has such thick hair, this is a great way to texturize the hair. So again, starting at the bottom, working my way up, working my way up. There we go. And you can see how much hair comes off, but it doesn't cut it off completely. And you can already see how much lighter it is. We're able to get these airy chunks, which is really cool, where we wouldn't be able to get this kind of look if we didn't do this texturizing, just because, again, Nick's hair is so thick. And thick hair usually doesn't look airy, so we've got to go in there and texturize it to make it look airy. Okay, twisting the hair, starting down here at the base, slowly closing my scissor, but not all the way, working my way up to the top. You can see the hair that's removed. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put some product into the hair, and then I'll probably cut it a little bit more. The product's going to give me an idea of how Nick is going to actually wear his hair. So the way Nick's hair is right now is basically what it's going to look like after he gets out of the shower and it dries. But then he's going to style it, and so I want to make sure that there are no pockets of weight in the hair once he does style it. So we're going to go through and dress it first, and I'm just using some pomade to go in there and give it some texture, and then we'll go through, figure out where it's still heavy, where it's still bulky, where we might want to take a little bit more weight off. What I'm doing is, you can see I'm literally just twisting. My fingers are just twisting, and by twisting I'm creating these points of texture. These points of texture are able to be created due to all the twisting that we did in texturizing. See, when I take this piece of hair and I twist it, it's kind of got a nice chunky look, where before it was so thick it wouldn't really give you this kind of chunky look. So all that twisting that we did a second ago is what's able to allow us to dry and style Nick's hair in a more chunky kind of effect. So just getting the pomade, and I'm going in, twisting where I want to see basically chunks of texture. I'm also feeling, as I'm applying this pomade into Nick's hair, I'm feeling where it's still heavy. I can get a sense of, like right here, obviously you can't feel it on the camera, but there's still a lot of hair there. So I'm going to go through, texturize that section a little bit more. There's less hair here, so when we did that twisting, more texturizing happened here versus right here. So I'm going to get my scissors, and that's exactly why I like to put some pomade in before I finish the cut. It allows me to kind of go through and feel where I need to take a little bit more hair off. So okay, so where I was talking about earlier, there's some hair right there that's pretty thick. I'm going to just take my scissor right into that spot, starting at the scalp, slowly closing my scissor, not all the way, open, close, working my way up and kind of removing some hair. And I'm going to do that in several places where it just feels still a little on the thick side. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm just going to go through, as we were talking about, and just kind of place the hair where I want to see it. So I'm just going to twist hair where I think it'd look cool to have some texture. I'm going to pat hair down where I think it'll look cool to be flat. And that's pretty much it. So as you're styling and dressing your hair, you're just simply going to take your finger, kind of twist it into place where you think it would look cool to have some chunky texturized effect. Okay, so basically now as a recap, we started with cutting the sides and the back. I knew I wanted to keep the top longer. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it other than I knew I wanted it to be chunky and texturized, which we've created here. So we sectioned the top away so I could save that for last, and we basically cut and removed all of the hair around the sides and back, and then scissor overcombed it nice and short and clean. Then after that, we created a section here in the middle so that the front was the longest piece, kind of from long piece to here to shorter here at the center, and then we took horizontal sections, basically using that as our guide. Then once we did that, we blended in the sides and then texturized a lot up here at the top so that it can have a nice chunky effect. So then once we did all that, we just put some pomade into it, kind of twisted the hair to create these chunky pieces. And basically you're just doing it wherever you think you want to do it. Like I said, you can lay it flat, you can pull it up. That's up to you and how you want to dress it with the pomade. So that is the end of the haircut. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And I want to thank you so very much again for watching this tutorial.